Hello and welcome to The Society with Fatma Shaheen at PTV World. Now, despite the fact that female entrepreneurship has very steadily risen in Pakistan, rather world over, we still see the fact that even a lot of women, even today, are not very comfortable. They are not very keen to actually start their own businesses. Why is that the case? This is exactly what we'll be talking about in our today's show. We'll also be talking about the various challenges that women entrepreneurs do face in the Pakistani society, whether those challenges emanate from a lack of law or policy, whether those challenges actually, culminate from the fact that, there are social and cultural restraints on them, or for that matter, whether those challenges are very deeply entrenched with the negative stereotypes which do exist with regards to working women generally in Pakistan. This and much more to follow on today's show, and to do that, I have with me an extremely distinguished panel, all of whom are leading women entrepreneurs in their own right. From them, we'll be having some real conversations, and we will try to learn from them that, what were the challenges that they particularly faced in becoming the successful women entrepreneurs that they are today, and what is the advice that they would want to pass on. On that note, I'll introduce you to my today's panel. My first panelist for the show today is Ms. Sadia Salman, who is a business development and healthcare entrepreneur. Assalamu alaikum, Sadia, and welcome to the show.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. My second panelist for the show today is Ms. Aisha Nasir, who is a community mobilizer alongside being a social media entrepreneur. Assalamu alaikum, Jeen, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
And my third panelist for the show today is Ms. Sahar Tarar, who is an entrepreneur as well. Assalamu alaikum, Sahar, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Fatma. It's really good to be here with you guys.
I'll start the conversation with you, Sadia. Something which I just mentioned in my introduction as well, that when we talk about, women entrepreneurs, we see that there has been a rise, general rise in female entrepreneurship, not only in Pakistan, but world over. But when, of course, we compare these figures with that of, males, we do see that a lot of women are still hesitant to come forward and start their own businesses or enterprises. So as a successful women entrepreneur, how do you explain this?
Yes, so in my opinion, I think it needs to start at a very early stage. As kids, when we are young and compared to our brothers, and how brothers and sisters are compared to each other, especially in our culture, it needs to start at a very, very early stage, especially while they're like schooling stage, or otherwise, especially when their parents need to encourage them as kids to be more independent, to have their own mindset, to have their own goals, and to give them the encouragement to do things themselves.
Right.
So I think it should start at a very early stage. But as we grow up and go along, you see that our society also has a lot of pressure, which women face, throughout when they're even teenagers. As teenagers, I've seen girls who are not sure of themselves, who don't know when they will be, whether they'll be allowed to do a certain thing or not.
But then I think these are the characteristics which, which stay with them, and this would be something which would emanate even if they opt for a job at the end of the day. And I think, starting up a business or enterprise is a personal decision, because a lot of times we see that a lot of girls who do belong to, salaried families, who have parents who are both working, they are doing a job per se, they'd say that, we just don't want to follow your footsteps, we want to start our own business.
That's true.
So I think, other than, of course, the challenges that women do face, this is something which is very personal, it's something very subjective too.
It's a very risky thing to do for anybody, be it a male or a female. But especially for females, they're not encouraged enough to take that step.
And I think for this, you need to be a risk taker, per se, basically. But coming to you, Aisha, we must also talk about this in the form of, I think, a pull and a push factor. Because a lot of times I see that women, they start, their own businesses, their own enterprises, because they have that financial burden on them. They want to actually contribute to the household expenses and, of course, generally pull themselves out of poverty. But a lot of times we also see that, women, they are actually pushed to do this because they have a creative idea per se, which of course they otherwise can't pursue. So how do you balance this thing out? Because we have seen the trends changing over a period of time.
Yeah. So I think it comes down to necessity being like the mother of invention. So when you look at, the career woman in Pakistan or the corporate woman in Pakistan, she's like pretty much, doesn't have a lot of choices, sadly. There is no option of part-time work in numerous professions in Pakistan. I have so many friends who are bankers, who are doctors, who are engineers, who had to just abandon their careers when, when the choice came to, do you want to be home for your child, or do you just want to be absent all the time, or do you just want to be traveling all the time? Many professions in Pakistan, in fact, I think all of them don't have a part-time option. Then the work from home option doesn't exist. Flexible timings doesn't exist. Extended leaves like maternity. I had to leave a very like high paying job myself, because after my second pregnancy, like I was given no maternity leaves, you know, no paternity leaves.
Right, Aisha, your point is noted, on which I'll come to you. I think this is something on which you can perhaps, deliberate further, considering that, she raised a very important point that, when we talk about laws and we talk about policies, we need to take so many things into account if we want actually to promote female entrepreneurship. But overall, since you've had that benefit of working with so many governments, how do you see our laws, how do you see our policies being conducive to women who actually want to, have their own businesses, and not only have their businesses, but also to sustain them further?
Actually, Fatma, that is a very good question. There is a lot of work that different governments have done, and there's a lot of research. There are different research wings which work on such topics, and they work on policy making, and they have come up with very good ideas. But the thing here is, the laws are there, the policies are in place, but the implementation is missing. And it is not missing from the end of any government. Mostly it is missing on the personal level. When it comes to implementation, I would say where we lack is there is a level of trust that is missing, because the law is there. Is it going to be implemented? Is it how we are going to move forward with it? If a woman is harassed at work, where is it going to lead? When it comes to is she going to get justice? How is she going to be taken in the society? So as Sadia did highlight that point, that it all starts from childhood, how it all comes to upbringing. So the thing here is, I can teach anyone about right and wrong, but what choice they make is their personal decision.
Of course.
So that is something very important. Policies are in place when it comes to loans for women entrepreneurs, when it comes to
loans,
teaching them skills.
I think that is something very important that you have raised, because when we talk about loans, I think all of you had that privilege that you did have that money to have your own startups. But a lot of times we see that women are not advantaged that way, especially when we talk about maybe women who belong to rural and remote areas of Pakistan. So when we talk about small to medium enterprises, when we talk about home-based businesses, do you not feel, Sadia, that accessing those finances, accessing those financial resources, that in itself is also a very big hindrance to women becoming entrepreneurs?
That's absolutely true. So obviously, for a business to start, you need financing. There's no business, no entrepreneurship, like women, especially even men. So everybody needs financing, obviously, to start. So that's one big chunk which is missing. So I think in the last month, I saw some banks, and they were advertising this, and they were working with women entrepreneurs. I was invited to one of those as well, where they were giving out loans on a very low, interest rate. So I think people are working on that. But as far as and I want to add to what Aisha said earlier, that we need to implement those laws and those rules personally as well. So as she said, they are laws, but they are not implemented. So as a business entrepreneur, I would like to give my example. So at our place, we have a long maternity leave. Aisha, you should ask my employees.
But then everybody doesn't work with you. She's talking about the public
it's women supporting women,
exactly
right?
saying that, because somebody, you have to start somewhere. So if I cannot make a big impact on the entire world, the least I can do is work with the people who work with me.
And of course that is something very good and very heartening to start.
And they have flexible hours, they work from home for weeks upon weeks, they work from as long as the work gets done. So this also needs to be put across to other companies.
I think this is the reason why I had all of you today on my show, because the reason to invite all of you and to discuss this issue is that we need to project more women like you, so you can all actually serve as examples, as mentors for women who want to be future entrepreneurs. Aisha, I think she again raised some very valid points, and we must talk about this in a social cultural context. To a lot of times we see that women want to start their own businesses, have their own enterprises, but they're not allowed by their families to do so. More so in orthodox families, or for that matter maybe in remote and rural areas of Pakistan. So in cases where this, unfortunately, this kind of obstruction that does come from the society and culture itself, how do you feel can we overcome that?
Okay, I feel a little differently. I actually believe every mom is an entrepreneur because every mom is managing a budget in one way or another, you know, and she's managing a workforce, whether it's just her and her husband or it's her and like, you know, like my nano, for example, and she wasn't really an entrepreneur, but she was managing a workforce of 55 people. Like that's the size of the people that she was managing, and she had a budget, you know, and there were events and there was accountability. So in essence, she was running a business. So I feel, to be honest, I feel the issue is no longer, you know, when women on Scary may talk about we're not allowed to work. So I keep telling them, then change the definition of what work is to you. So I feel that today men have no issues, or most men would not have issues.
I think that would be a very sweeping statement to
no,
make.
No, yeah.
But I'm talking about women who belong to remote
No,
and rural
exactly.
areas,
So
yes.
even women who belong to remote areas are running their house, right? So men are giving them money to basically buy the atta, to buy the chawal, etc.
But maybe they would not be comfortable with their, you know, female counterparts.
So I'll tell you where the
money.
issue becomes. So what I've seen is, like, again and again, I've seen this, and with, you know, through Scary Yummy, we work with women from like Mandi Bhavdin to Daska to England and New York. So what I've seen is that the problem is that they don't mind the start. So generally men wouldn't mind, she's making a cake or she's making cupcakes or she's writing an article. The problem is when she becomes a disruptor in the system that they know. And that happens very quickly. So I feel men are completely okay with their women being unsuccessful women entrepreneurs, or being like, you know, very like ground level women entrepreneurs,
you know, maybe which doesn't actually camouflage them at
or
the end
disrupts
of the day.
the system. Like if you disrupt patriarchy,
but if you talk
that
about,
is where there's a problem.
If you disrupt, you know, if you talk about disrupting the patriarchy, I think we need to go back to the basics per se, Aisha, because if you are empowering women, economically empowering them, then of course the school of thought which is against this empowerment says per se that they shouldn't be allowed to be economically empowered because that in turn disrupts the patriarchy. So how do these things coexist?
Well, that's why men have kept a glass ceiling on us, right? So like go down to, let's say, medical college, which is where I went. Even today, more women will pass the medical exams than men. So we will have more women passing the MCATs. We will have more women qualifying for medical colleges. We'll have more women getting medals in medical colleges. You go to King Edward, the boards are filled. That's our glass ceiling.
But then a lot of women don't end up in places where they need to be.
Well, if they're going to give women all night duties, obviously there will come a time when she's like, okay, I need to take a break, right? And that is where the numbers fall off. So there are thousands of successful women doctors out of work. Why? Because they began disrupting the patriarchy. As long as they were students, the male doctors didn't have an issue. So the minute they were snatching away their earning potential. So similarly, I feel with husbands, I've seen this a lot.
Right, Aisha. Asar, would you agree with what she's saying? Because, you know, when we talk about these socio-cultural restraints, or for that matter, constraints, to start off with, of course, the nature of these constraints, they differ depending on the kind of socio-economic class that you belong to. Maybe somebody who is living in a modern urban city would not have to face these issues, but maybe somebody who's living in a remote village in Pakistan would have to. So how do you compare and contrast?
Fatma, to be honest, I do not really agree that much that the environment is so positive and friendly, and unless they're doing, I think taking, as Aisha said, it's not about taking the initiative, it's about once you start becoming successful. Yeah, a part of that is true, and it is rightly so, because she has had different circumstantial experiences. But with me, what I have seen in the people in the society that I have been moving around in, taking the initiative, getting those permissions to start a business or work is the main, that is the main like thing that you need, main border that you need to cross. It's not about timing that much, because that women kind of manage, they compromise, there are ways to work around that. It is about the permissions that comes from the families, that come from the male counterparts of the families. And then again, not only that, the next very important factor
and
is
like Aisha very
financials.
rightly put in her words, disrupting basically the whole system. Those who actually support patriarchy do oppose women's economic empowerment, because they feel that women being economically empowered would disrupt the system. So again, it's a vicious cycle, it's a circular argument.
Yes, and it is more about having a control over a family. Here in our society and in many other societies as well, it's not really in our country, it's with other countries as well, when a woman becomes empowered financially and the man is not really doing that well, that kind of disrupts not only their patriarchal mindset, but it is about disrupting their married life as well. So in my company there is something very odd that I would like to add. A lot of people might disagree with me, but when somebody joins and they are unmarried, I request them, if they agree to it, it's not a law but it is just a request, that they at least give 5 years to the company without getting married.
That is such a
And that
restrictive
is-
covenant.
Yeah,
Basically,
yeah, I
you're
know.
barring women's right to marriage. This is the
Yeah.
constitutional rights of theirs.
I know, I'm not
The state is
stopping
under a
them.
duty to protect
I kind
family,
of
marriage,
request
mother and
them
child.
for that, because the thing here is you can't really just reach where your goals, or be on the top of your career in just a few months. There are a lot of women who have done that, but
you need to
usually-
invest. But the thing is, Sarah, another way to look at it is that you can actually help them work post marriage, something which she was also
Post-marriage.
saying.
Actually,
So
yeah,
why
that's-
I think there is
yes.
this trend, and
I
I
would
think this
actually
is
like
something
to say
which is
I don't
evolved,
feel
Sadia.
marriage is a
opposite.
deterrent in any
Right.
way.
It actually
And I
is.
think a
One-
lot of
yeah.
women these days, they are
Yeah.
proving that. In fact,
Yeah,
there are so many women who I personally
Yeah,
know
yeah.
who actually started their own businesses post their marriages,
Yes.
and they have their
It's
husbands
me,
and their
Aisha,
families
both of us
Well,
support
supporting
I
them
them
at the
became, I'm a
end.
mompreneur, but also, like, if you think marriage is a deterrent, well, having a father figure who's a patriarch
Right.
is a deterrent.
Thing here is, when it comes to this concept of mine, the reason here is not to stop married women from working. The reason is I want women, at least the women working around me, to understand that they kind of have to prioritize their financial stability
Of
as well.
course.
It's not about just getting married to someone and becoming a financial liability, though in our religion it is the husband's responsibility.
Right, Saha, your point is noted. On which I'll come to you, Sadia. I think we must also talk about this entire discussion in the context of women who are, differently abled, who are physically disabled, and of course they can't work in the same manner, perhaps, in which able-bodied women can, especially in terms of running their businesses. So when we talk about, this strata of the Pakistani society, how do you feel can we help them not only enter into businesses but also sustain those, in the long term?
That's a very good question, because we are not an inclusive society as it is. Our schools are not inclusive, our businesses are not inclusive, even the government jobs are not inclusive. So when I did my CSS, they were like 20 girls who were chosen, like selected. Out of 150, all the rest were men. Although I know the rest of the women, like as I went along, and I worked for FPR for 16 years, and I saw throughout all the women who were not selected might have been a better option, literally. So it's just that, the same thing Aisha was talking about, there's a big gap between selections, and so it's like cultural, it's like in our society there are no
And
laws.
I think this gap is
There
there
are
in
no
terms
laws.
of pay, this gap is there in terms of
Yes.
jobs, and of course in terms of entrepreneurship, something which
Yes,
we've been
exactly,
discussing too.
financing, everything.
Everything.
So basically this has to be ingrained in the women from the beginning, like we said earlier, because nobody is going to actually look after them. They are there on their own, and they have to make it on their own.
Right.
And
But of course, at the same time, you just can't expect them to
Yes.
make it on
So
their
wha-
own
for
if
the
the system
special-
is not enabling. The system
Exactly.
needs to be enabling
The
as well,
system needs to
and they need
enable
to take
them.
that initiative too. So it's a combination
Both.
of two things,
Exactly.
basically. But Sadi, then what about those women? A lot of times we see, and this is something very common in our society, that women, once they take their career breaks, it's difficult for them to reintegrate back into the society. So what about that pool of women entrepreneurs?
Okay, so I have taken 3 career breaks. For instance, I'll talk about myself, and also what I can tell you about my staff, my people at my business who've been with me for the last 10 years. Some of them have been there for 6 years. They've taken career breaks every time they were expecting, or they had to travel, or even recreation breaks. So it's not very difficult to gel back in if your business place is helpful.
If it
they
is
are
inclusive
welcoming
to
you
start
back.
out with, if it is
Exactly.
conducive, if it is sensitized at the end of the day, and I
Exactly.
think gender policy concerns, they have a very major role to play
Exactly.
here.
So the organizational
Right.
culture matters a lot.
Right, and I think this is something which shouldn't be a problem, provided that gender policy concerns, they are prioritized by that particular organization. On which I'll come to you, Aisha. I think a very interesting thing which actually emanates from today's conversation is the fact that, of course, we don't negate the fact that there are social cultural restraints, laws and policies. They really need to be, non-discriminatory if we want to encourage more female entrepreneurship. But at the end of the day, do you not feel that women at some times, they themselves also underestimate their abilities, in the sense that I've seen that, a lot of girls who have a lot of potential, they might just not do their own thing, their own enterprise, have their own business, because they might feel that they are too young to be taken seriously. And then, this is something which we see in different parts of the world as well. It's just not something which is common to our Pakistani society. So when it comes to these very internalized conceptions that women have about themselves, how do you feel can we, we help them actually, improve their self-esteem, improve the way they look at themselves, and of course give them that push in the right direction?
So, Napoleon once said that give me good mothers and I will give you a great nation. And, I feel that even though I come across as somebody who's very confident and secure, I think I suffer from like a huge slew of insecurities, just like so many other women my age. Because when we were being brought up, regardless of how empowered our moms were, it was pretty much said that women play second fiddle to men. Now it's maybe still believed but not said that openly, because now women have a stronger voice. But it was definitely there was this huge undercurrent where we were made to believe, and the rishta culture and the trolley culture, and like putting women up for display, and all those things that now we talk about and we shun were norms like 15 years ago even. The dowry cultures and all this. So it all ends up with a woman in Pakistan feeling that she's just not good enough. She needs to do something extra.
Exactly.
So like whether it's bringing the dowry, whether it's, I don't know, having a PhD yet working in the home. So there's always a sense of how we need to do a lot more to just kind of match up with the men, which is where the salary gap comes. So when you look at the salary gap,
and so many other gaps, be it the job, the pay gap,
reason we have
the
a salary
gender parity gap, so many other gaps.
Absolutely. And one of the researches that Harvard Business School did into why is there a salary gap? I mean, if there's a woman executive, a male executive, why is there a salary gap? The biggest reason, women just don't ask for what they are due.
Right, Aisha. And I think in this way, I think women, they also need to make that initiative, like you very rightly pointed out. But at the same time, I think even when they do make this initiative, it's more difficult for them to actually prove their work so as to be able to claim the same rights. To which I'll come to you, Sahar. Would you want to add something to what she said?
Yes, actually, I would like to add a point over here. I think that women are actually being sometimes misused. They are used as display pieces. Like if you want to sell something, they usually put out more and more of females out there, because they know that the culture over here is that they might not hang up the call on the face of a woman, right? And I think that is something that we need to change. It is all about awareness. It is all about teaching the women as well that just because you don't get an opportunity to work in a safe work environment, don't opt for a one that is dangerous for you.
Right. And I think here again the same things come into play. I think implementation, strict implementation of the laws and policies that we do have, and of course promulgation of new laws to make safe working places for women per se. And I think in this regard, cyber harassment again is a very pressing concern on which I think we've seen a lot of concerns being raised during COVID-19, where we did see a lot of women startups actually coming into place. Now where they would be operating these businesses, they would also be simultaneously fighting off all these cyber stalking, cyber harassment kind of issues. So how do you see COVID-19 overall impacting female entrepreneurship in Pakistan?
So Fatma, it was such an eye-opener. It was such a surprise, like a pleasant surprise, that we, once the offices were closed and the businesses were shut down, many of the people started working from home. So I personally know a lot of people who started like home chefs. They became home chefs and they started these food businesses from home. And once COVID left, like not left, but it went better and people went back to work, and their husbands or their other family members who had been laid off or whose work had suffered, they actually pitched into the women's businesses, and now they've become big names.
A lot of times I've seen that, you know, women say that they actually got that push to start their own
Exactly.
business during COVID-19 because they probably
Yes.
didn't have anything else to
They
do.
had nothing else, and they had no financial, you know, security. They didn't know where the next, you know, month's income was coming from.
Right, Sadia, your point is noted, on which I'll come to you, Aisha. I think we must also talk about this in the context of, you know, women being stereotyped because they work, women being stereotyped because they are in the public sphere, so to speak. So how do you feel can media actually work to break these typical negative stereotypes? Because media, as we all understand, is the fourth pillar of the state, and it has a very pivotal role to actually play to do the same.
So I think one of the worst things that media and the stereotyping has done is pretty much pit women against women. So we have become our own worst enemies. So forget the men. It's literally women against women. So, you know, as somebody who's like very out there, the one question I'm asked like all the time is, how do I give time to my kids? Even though my kids are kind of always in my work. But even then, this question of can you be a good mom if you're a working mom stems from stereotypes and basically stems from women. It's not men asking this question. It's not men accusing women. It's coming from the women, and the women are getting it from the media, because every pious, beautiful, perfect mother is a stay-at-home mom. For some reason, the working mom is always frazzled and, you know, running after herself and not doing a great job. But the stay-at-home mom is perfect. Her hair is done properly. The food is properly laid down. That's an age-old stereotype, but I think it's done more damage to women today and for, you know, years to come than anything else has. You know, we talk about the damage of seeing more white people on screen. We talk about the damage of seeing more men on screen. Absolutely. But I feel, honestly, the most poisonous thing has been seeing the perfect stay-at-home mom and constantly seeing the imperfect, frazzled,
But,
going crazy
you
working
know,
mom.
respectfully, I would want to, you know, differ with you slightly. We do see a lot of, you know, dramas now being made where women are being portrayed in a very positive, strong light too. We do see, in fact, for that matter, transgenders being given
Yes.
screen space. We also see very important social causes being highlighted, child abuse,
Yes.
honor crimes, acid attacks being highlighted that way. So I think maybe in terms of the line which is stored for women, the portrayal of strong characters, that needs to be increased. But, you know, with due respect, I would want to disagree with you on the fact that, you know, it's all that way, because we do see some very strong characters coming on the forefront. To which I'll come to. I think she's mentioned one aspect of the entire debate. I think in this regard, we must also talk about just not the role of dramas. We must also talk about the kind of content which is being produced on talk shows and, you know, generally the programs that we do see on Pakistani television. So how do you feel can we work to improve this content such that, you know, it actually basically deliberates upon these issues which are very important at the end of the day, especially those which relate to female entrepreneurship, those which relate to empowering female entrepreneurs in Pakistan?
Actually, there's a very important factor that I would want to add over here. We can't really depend completely on governments to do something. We, as a part of the society, as a part of the community, we need to take steps, initiatives. We need to take responsibility. Like just like Aisha is doing a lot of work, she's helping other mothers realize their potential and, you know, unleash it. In the very similar way, we need to understand that we need to create awareness. Awareness, not it can be about social media awareness, it can be about on the TV screen, it can be through dramas, through screenplays, through celebrities. We
see so many celebrities endorsing so many social causes.
Exactly. And then again, when it comes to shows like these, like you invite women who are doing well in their life, who are running a house as well, and who are doing very well in their life otherwise as well, career wise as well. So you bring them forward to show other women and other men in the society that being a working woman doesn't mean that you're ignoring your house.
Right, you can have that perfect work-life balance.
That perfect balance. But actually what I think is that a perfect balance is that you are a working woman and you have a homely life as well. It is imbalanced
working women, whether you have a job per se or for that matter you're running your own business, because at the end of the day, you see, this is all a vicious cycle, because at the end of the day, of course, if women are working, whether they are doing a job or for that matter running their own business, they're helping in, of course, alleviating poverty, which stabilizes the economy. And then, of course, we all, agree on the fact that, economically empowering women is a very important form of, empowering women per se.
I really think it is also the need of the hour as well. Because of the inflation, one person cannot really run the household. You need help, and there is no shame in asking for that, because your counterpart, your spouse, they are kind of equally responsible socially and financially as well. If they can add some value, they should. They shouldn't take it as like ye to sirf, like this is all that men need to do, it is their responsibility. No, we as women, if we can make a difference, we should stand up, we should take initiatives, we should take a job or open a business, and will start getting that support. One main factor that I think that kind of is a hindrance is that women, when we start making money, we kind of are not able to stay graceful with that. We kind of start showing off to the spouses in a way that they feel insulted or humiliated in a way. So I think we need to teach this and create this kind of awareness for women as well, that how to take the financial or career growth empowerment.
At the end of the day, it's something that shouldn't get to your head per se. It should be something which should, of course, pay back to the family and in the longer run to the economy of the country. But it is something which shouldn't, be used to actually bifurcate your marriage, in other words. But coming to you, Sadia, and coming towards the conclusion of the show, I think she raised some very valid points, of which I think one is the fact that women, they need to support women. And in this regard, I think it's very important that we have, mentor-mentee programs, especially when it comes to women entrepreneurs like yourself. And this is something I feel that is lacking in the society today. We see a lot of professions where a lot of seniors of the profession, they actually take out time to actively coach and to mentor the younger aspiring, people who want to enter that particular profession. So how can this be done? Because I do understand the fact that you've been working with a private university and you have been giving out such sessions.
Yes. So I've been into mentorship since around 7 years now. So this university, they approached me, they wanted to send their, graduates to me with their brilliant ideas. So the ideas were brilliant, but they were idealistic. And they wanted me to talk to them and tell them, so you can guide them from the beginning instead of them making the same mistakes I made, so that will save them probably a couple of years of financial burden. So what we need is these universities to make some incubation centers for entrepreneurship, where their own students, graduates, and maybe other people also can come and share their ideas, and maybe somebody can mentor them, or they can then.
And I think these are the places where they need to be taught the basics, like the basics of the labor market dynamics, the debt, basically how to pay that off, the financials that we need to know, which women otherwise do not know. And for this, I think you don't need to be maybe somebody with a specialization in finance. It's something like, if you're giving women so many other basic things like life skill based education. We remember that this was a debate which was actually very actively being pursued some time back, that we need to teach children few life skill based training. So I think these are the things that perhaps could be very intelligently incorporated on that. Right, Saida, your point is noted, on which I'll come to you, Aisha, coming towards the conclusion of the show. I think we've spoken about the role of media, mentor, mentee, and so many other things. But I think in this regard, we must also talk about the pivotal role of education as it does stand in Pakistan. So what responsibility do you feel lies on educational institutions, especially when it comes to strengthening of female entrepreneurship in Pakistan?
So I think the responsibility lies on everybody, because we're all shaping the narrative in our own way. So, now we use the term influencer in terms of the social media influencer, but even earlier, when there was no social media, women and men were still influencers in their own circles. So, whatever the father says is the sons are heavily influenced. Whatever the elder brother says, the younger brothers are heavily influenced. So it comes down to the language we use, the vernacular we use, like little things like, how even today we'd be like, okay, for a girl or for a daughter, a lot of discrimination is not deliberate. It's not, men getting up today and saying, okay, we want to today act unjust to women. It's really like something that's stuck in your subconscious. So to change it, the change begins from vocabulary, then it goes into having more women writers, having more women singers, having more women representation in policy
and
making.
representation more so at a higher level, so that we have that trickle down kind of an effect. Just like recently we saw that Pakistan had its first female judge in the Supreme Court, something which has of course made history. Coming towards you and coming towards the conclusion of the show, Sahar, I think we must also talk about the potential role of youth, and I think you are that one person on the panel today which has had that direct experience of working with young people in Pakistan, more so young entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs. So how do you feel can we encourage young people, young females to actually open their own businesses?
Fatma, working on awareness and the finances, these two things go hand in hand. Women, sometimes they do get financial help, but they end up losing that finances in different experiences just because they are not aware about certain legalities. They're not aware that if you're starting a partnership, so even though the next person is being too sweet and too nice, still you need to do the written paperwork properly. You need to make sure that so I think awareness is a very important factor in there. We need to make our youth aware of certain life-saving skills, I would say, because this would save them from a lot of unnecessary.
This is something exactly what I said, that it should be categorized to be part of very important component of life skill based education which you give to children.
You are going to carry about taxation. We need to inform them, we need to educate them. The education shouldn't be just be limited to certain sums or numbers or formulas.
Formal education
should be giving life skills. They should be more finishing schools, the more grooming schools, and universities as well, because it is about knowing how and where to spend and how to. One more very important factor is mentorship. I would say, because a lot of us, once we want to do something, a lot of young people, it is just the age which gives them that kind of energy that they think that they are always right. So they need mentors to show them the right direction. People who are inspirational, whom they are.
And I think then these mentors also need to be highlighted. So at least to the ones that they cannot reach out, you can reach out to them through media. So all in all, I think it is a collective responsibility, and that is how it should be. It is something that on which we of course need the society's support, on which note I would like to conclude today's show. Thank you so much, Sadia. Thank you so much, Aisha. And thank you so much, Saha, for being here with us today. Well, to conclude today's show, we generally spoke about the ever-evolving, the ever-emerging, rather the latest female entrepreneurship trends as they do exist in the Pakistani society today. What we do need to work upon is to have more coherent, to have more strong laws and policies in place which actually protect, rather facilitate women who opt to become women entrepreneurs. What we do need to work upon is, of course, removing structural and institutional barriers in order to facilitate women who opt to have their own businesses. And last but not the least, what we do need to work upon is to actually do away with those negative, gender stereotypes which unfortunately stereotype women who want to work, who want to make a livelihood not only for themselves but for their families too. And in this regard, the family, our culture, that has a very important role to play. On that note, signing off for today. Until next time, take care and Allah Hafiz.